ridiculous to consider Israel as, white as the driven snow and everything is perfect. But it's equally ridiculous to say that Israel is split equally down the middle, and there's a good Israel and there's a bad Israel, and if only, there's a battle for the soul of Israel, and Netanyahu represents the bad Israel. But if only Yair Lapid, the liberal alternative, could be elected, then all of a sudden Israel will be, all roses. But of course, this is ridiculous. These two men served in the same government, pursuing the same policies for years. So we need a different model for understanding. But it is difficult to understand if you're coming from outside and if you don't speak Hebrew necessarily. Unlike here in the United States, in Israel, we don't just have two major parties. We've got dozens of parties that run for the Knesset, Israel's parliament, and at least a dozen get in pretty much every time. So how can we understand the politics of Israel? I would argue that we need to break them down into 4 distinct camps to help us understand. And the way that we understand the differences between these camps, we ask a question relating to the Torah, the Jewish religious text. We say, is the Torah holy? Is it written by God? And we ask, is the Torah just? Is it right when the Torah says that the Jewish people are God's chosen people and that He gave them the land of Israel, Palestine for themselves to be owners of this land? So let's look at the different camps as I define them. The first one I call supremacist. This is like the traditional Orthodox position. And they would say to both of these questions, yes and yes. Yes, the Torah is holy. It's written by God. And yes, it's just, it's right that God says we're the chosen people and the land of Israel is ours. Then we have the reformist camp. They answer differently. They would say, yes, the Torah is holy, but no, it's not just. It's not right to say that only we are chosen and only to us does this land belong. So we need to take the Torah and tinker with it and change it and amend it and bring it in line with our modern day values. That's the reformist camp, as I call it. Then another camp is the opportunist camp. This is the name I gave it, the traditional Zionist position. And they would answer the opposite. They would say, no, the Torah is not holy. Of course not. It's just literature. It wasn't written by God. It was written by people and edited by other people in different periods of times. But yes, it is just when the Torah says that we are the chosen people and this land is ours. So in summary, no, there's no God, but yes, God gave us this land. So they don't even believe in that, so they're opportunists. They're just taking advantage of the religious. And then there's the humanist camp, and they would say no and no to both of those questions. No, this is not written by God. The Torah is literature. Just like Shakespeare is a literature of the British people, so the Torah is a literature of Jewish people, but it's not holy, and it's not just to say that we are more special than others, or that we are more chosen, or that this land belongs to us more than anyone else. So those are the 4 camps. Another way of understanding it is we could say, instead of looking at the Torah, we can look at how these camps relate to the indigenous people of Palestine, the non-Jewish neighbors in their midst. And in this, we would have a different scheme, same 4 camps, but different names to describe them, and symbols that would help us remember them. So there's the integration camp, and they want a one-state democracy, one state from the river to the sea, and everyone in the country having equal rights. The next camp would be the separation camp. They want 2 states, a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. Third camp is the domination camp. They want one state from the river to the sea, but they want it to be an apartheid state where Jews have more rights than non-Jews. And then there's the elimination camp, and they want the country, again, to be one state from the river to the sea, but ethnically cleansed of non-Jews. So we can ask how these camps relate to the Palestinians or the non-Jews, and we can ask how they relate to the Torah. And of course, we could also just use the typical, accepted forms of political categorization: socialist, liberal, nationalist, and theocrat. But whatever we use, these are the camps I've assigned. And it's also important to say, because Israel is the national project, so therefore the nationalist camp is the biggest camp by far. So big, in fact, that it makes more sense to kind of break it down into labor and revisionist or left and right. But make no mistake, they're all nationalists and they're all dominationists and they're all supporters of apartheid. So those are the four camps, and how does that help us understand Israeli politics? First, if we look at all of the elections for the Knesset in the last 2 decades, from 2000 to 2020, if we look at the performance of these parties, we can make no heads or tails. Like, we're trying to figure out what's going on here, and it seems that the fortunes of these parties rise and fall, and we can't really understand which one is more successful than the other. But if we take each of these political parties and we funnel them into the camps, and then we chart them on the graph, all of a sudden we see that there's incredible consistency. From election to election to election, the results of the Israeli elections are almost the same. The political discourse doesn't change. Consistently, it's the dominationist or the apartheid camp with the largest amount of votes by far, 60%, let's say. And the second largest camp being the eliminationist camp, the ethnic cleansing camp. And those are the two most powerful camps in the country. And they're the domination in the driver's seat and the eliminationists in the shotgun position. Again, over and over, we can map it from the left to the right, so we can get a sense of how skewed to the right Israeli politics are. And when we map it onto the Knesset, the 120-member parliament, we see that this is what it looks like. Vast span of blue of the nationalist camp, and the second biggest being the eliminationists. So what happened? Why are now, after at least 20 years of this, and probably more, but I was only able to get government data going back 20 years. But in any case, mapping these out, all of a sudden in 2019, there is a shift in Israeli politics. And the reason why is because Israel's longest serving prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, after a decade in power, he's charged with corruption crimes, major corruption crimes. And all of a sudden, he starts to lose some of his base of support. What happens? One of his most consistent allies bolts and leaves him, all of a sudden he can't put together a majority government. And so we have election after election after election, again and again, and there's no firm decision one way or another. Do the people hate Arabs more, or do they hate Netanyahu more? That seems to be the question of the day. And then until finally this logjam is broken through by one of the eliminationist parties, the religious parties, abandoning Netanyahu as well. And because of that, because they switched sides and formed an anti-Netanyahu government, they were able to leverage their power to demand that the leader of their party become the prime minister. And that's where we are today. For the first time in Israeli history, this is the most recent development. A year ago, we now have for the first time an eliminationist prime minister. This is what the government looks like now. The light, the different sectors that are light are representing the government, and the darker sectors are those that are in the opposition. So you see, it's the eliminationists who are spearheading the government. And according to Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, it'll be different from Netanyahu's government by being, in his words, 10 degrees more right-wing than Netanyahu. So this is what we can expect. But we also have another major development coming out from the same series of elections, one after the other, and that is the emergence. After 33 years of dormancy, where we didn't see them in the Knesset, we have the reemergence of a new camp, a camp that I call the Messianist camp. So what is this fifth camp? I would argue the Messianist camp or the monarchist camp, I say it's essentially the bastard love child of these nationalist and theocratic camps. So obviously the nationalists and the theocrats are two right-wing camps. But to their credit, we can say that at least they each have some kind of release valve that prevents it from going completely bonkers for what it's worth. The nationalists are, this is the camp that committed the Nakba. This is the camp that is enforcing apartheid with its will. But at least we can say they're secular, so you can have a discussion with them on a rational basis. All right, you can at least dialogue with them. On the other hand, the theocratic camp, their vision for the country is beyond the pale. They want to ethnically cleanse the country. But what we can say in their favor is that traditionally the ultra-Orthodox camp, the theocrats, have been pacifists, not activists. They don't believe that this vision of ethnic cleansing is for them to implement by their own hands. They believe that it should come from God, min Allah, that God will come down and implement this theocratic vision, and they are not supposed to, by their own actions, bring it into being. So each of these right-wing camps has a kind of a release valve. But with the monarchist camp, they combine the worst aspects of both of these camps. They want to ethnically cleanse the country, and they want to do it by their own hand. They're not waiting for anyone else. So this is the camp that is most dangerous, and now they have returned to the Knesset after 33-year absence. And they don't just want to eliminate the non-Jews, they want to exterminate the non-Jews, and they want to expand the country to include not just 48 territories and the West Bank and Gaza, and they want to also take over Lebanon and Jordan and Syria and Turkey and Iran and Iraq. Their vision is absolutely psychotic, and they're now in the Knesset, thanks to Benjamin Netanyahu.